Okay, good afternoon, members. Afternoon, everyone. The attendance sheet is going round. Can you please sign it? Sign it quick. Okay. Right. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Any interest? Can I call the monitor officer in?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not aware of any interest the members need to declare. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We move on to agenda item 3, minutes. To confirm that the minutes held on the 10th of June. They start on pages 5. Should go through them page by page. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6, so, which are obviously the last page is item 10 on the agenda. But okay, any matters arising from the minutes? No? Everyone happy to note? Yeah? Thank you, seconded. Thank you. The minutes are noted and confirmed. Okay, we move on to agenda item 4, action sheet, which starts on page 13. Okay, should we go through these page by page? Yeah. 13. Oh, that was only the one. I thought there was more than that, sorry. Yeah. Okay, agenda item 5, summary of executive decisions for scrutiny and review. And these start on pages.
Do you want me to mention that, please?
Yeah, I'm going to bring Geraint in a moment.
After the dispatch of the agenda took place, it was noted that noticed that a couple of the items that should have been included had been missed off. Hence why, before the meeting started, I've given you all a fresh copy. So the additional copy I've handed you, that's a copy of the most up-to-date list. So if you just ignore the actual list in your agenda.
Okay, thank you, Geraint. Should we go through the executive decisions then, page by page? Yeah. Okay, 19, 20, 21. Hugh?
Thank you, Chair. It was just disappointing to note on under section 6 the application to commence proceedings for closure of Torvine Energy Green Jobs. So it's just a comment on that, just to note that it was disappointing that that's happened due to lack of activity.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bevan. Noted. Carry on then. Page 21.
Chair.
Councillor Bevan.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a comment around this as well. For the Velathon Wales 2015 closure of various roads throughout Torvine to facilitate the inaugural cycling event, I did receive a letter on this from a number of concerned business owners that were impacted by the road closures and subsequent loss of business takings because customers could not get to various facilities. Just wanted that to be noted for consideration by the executive for any future events. This has been documented. I've sent copies that have been referred through member services. Additionally, a number of the businesses contacted various MPs and AMs on this particular matter as well, and there was concern that the organisers are a French company and that the profits were going overseas to a French company, and it seemed that the particular business owners expressed their views that they felt that their interests were being put before the interests of the local business owners. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I need to echo the sentiments that Councillor Bevan has expressed, really, Chair. I know there's a debriefing has took place and we have had information regarding that. So I, along with Councillor Bevan, and I'm sure my colleague Councillor Jones will share my thoughts as well on the subject, that in the future that we need to work more closely with the Guard, or they need to work with us more closely in the future, and perhaps try to mitigate the business aspect of the losses that were incurred.
Yeah, Councillor Jones, exactly the same. Councillor Ashley?
All I was going to add was the event was an immense success. I was down there with the Mayor, and despite the fact that I accept that some businesses were inconvenienced, and looking at the debriefing document, that was mentioned very much so in there. And although the company that put it on, a lot of that money went to charity. There was a considerable amount of money raised for charity in that event. And I had heard that the communities, although they were sceptical about it, there was a lot of goodwill generated from this event. So there's plus and minuses on it. And I hope a lot of lessons have been learnt from this, and that we as a council have taken more control over the event. From our point of view, and that's the lesson I hope is learned, and certainly welcome interventions from my colleagues on this.
Councillor Jones?
There's another aspect to this as well, whereby, as I say, councillors myself from Blanavon was blocked off. If you lived on one side of the town, you couldn't get out. So that really needs to be looked at. You're trapped.
Okay, thank you, members. It's obvious that it was successful, but more communication needs to be taken if in front of any other further events. Okay, thank you. We move on now to page 21. 22. 23. 24. 25. And page 26. Okay, everyone happy to note the executive decisions? Yes? Okay, thank you. We move on to agenda item 6, waste service standards, a report of last year's progress. I'd like to welcome Dana Einan. Dana, we've all read the report, so if you can give a very brief overview before any questions. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, members. A brief overview will be then. Wales Audit Office produced a report in July 2013 at the Council's invitation, suggesting that the Council needs to have service standards throughout, and they also suggested that waste to be used as the first trial. A report on that came to you in October 2013. And you gave comment on that report. The report included some draft service standards and a suggested action plan. You gave comment on that report, and those comments were taken on board. We then undertook some consultation with the public and also with operational staff, because that was within the Wales Audit Office report. They suggested that that was good practice, so we did that. I won't go through it now because you've read the report, but I've listed in my report in paragraphs from 4.5 down to 4.6 what the result of that consultation. We actually changed the service standards as a result of the consultation, and we then launched them on the 1st of April 2014. When we launched them, we said we gave a commitment that we would record performance against them on a quarterly basis within Funan, which we have done, which is obviously available to members to access should they wish to do so. And we also said that we would produce a report in the summer of 2015, which explained what we did against these service standards. So that is really the crux of this particular report. Effectively, what I've done under section 7, issues and findings, is I've listed each of the headings that were in the service standards, and I've then given a response to those headings from analysis. The actual service standards themselves represented a contract between, if you like, the council and the people of Torfaen. And they were amended quite significantly following your comments. I think what you originally saw in October 13 was quite a lengthy document. What we ended up with that went out to the public was one side of A4. And effectively, on the one side, we said, this is what you can expect from us. And on the other side, we said, and this is what we need from you, public of Torfaen. So effectively, what I've done in the report is I've gone through the actual headings themselves and done some analysis to give a response to that to see how we've done. I'm happy to go through those line by line, or I can just take questions on them. What I have said in my report on 2 separate occasions is that obviously we need to feed this back. We gave a commitment to feed this back to the public of Torfaen. There was nothing in the Wales Audit Office report that indicated how we should do that. So I've worked with our communications colleagues to say, well, look, here's the raw data. It's not very appealing in its current form. Can we make it into something a little bit more appealing? And what I've said in my report to you, and when I wrote my report to you, I basically said that's with the comms team. Since the report has been to you, I've actually had back from the comms team, I'm happy to circulate this, a suggested means by which we can publish this. So basically, it's exactly the same information that you've got in your report. It's just put in a more perhaps appealing style. So they've taken each of those headings and they've basically given a little coloured box and then giving the main information against each of those headings. I'm happy to circulate that to committee after the meeting. But it's essentially exactly the same wording that you've got in your report. There's nothing different than what's in the report itself. So do you want me to go through the individual headings briefly, or do you just want to ask me questions on those?
Well, what we were going to do, we've got some themes that we were going to go through step by step. So, I mean, before those subheadings and measures come up, don't we deal with the consultation first yet? Councillor Jones?
Dana, you have that document there. When was that released? Because it would have been ideal for us to have that information
Which
prior to
document?
this meeting.
This one here?
Yeah.
I only came back from leave on Monday, and it was on my inbox on Monday, which is why I brought it with me to the meeting to show you, and that's why I'm saying that I'll circulate it to committee afterwards. It wasn't available when I submitted this report.
Because it would have been ideal to have it.
Had it have been, I would have ensured it was included as part of the report.
Can I ask, how is that going to be sent out to the public? Because, I mean, obviously consultation, we haven't had that many responses when you have My Say, Facebook, Twitter, Torfaen Talks, and you're not having a lot of consultation back. So how will that be fed out to the public?
One of the things I'm picking up on my comms colleagues is around how best to do that. As I said, there was nothing in the Wales Audit Office report that suggested how we do it. It's probably going to be something that we signpost people to through digital media. So it'll probably be signposted from the council's website. There'll be a banner. We can signpost it from Torfaen Talks, which is written media for people that aren't on the digital media. We can certainly push it out through social media, which we do. We use social media quite a lot. So those are the ideas that I've come up with, but I'm waiting to hear back from comms colleagues as any other ways that we can do it. And I'm also, I think within the scrutiny report, I've actually said I would welcome comments from committee on how they think we can best do that. So I'm happy to receive those comments.
I mean, I personally think it should be sent out, if possible, through every door. But that's, so because you've got a lot of people who are not on Facebook, not on Twitter, for elderly people, and they're just not getting the message. So I think it needs to be sent out personally, door by door. Councillor Evans.
So, can I just query that? When you say to every door, do you mean physically, as part of Torfaen Talks, or do you mean posted? Because obviously there's a huge cost implication to that.
Well, you could put an insert into Torfaen Talks, couldn't you, the leaflet, not on a page, but a separate page. Right. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I agree that we need to consider people that don't access Facebook and all the other IT areas. I wanted to ask you a question, Dana, about the Stage 1 complaints. I see here in the information you've covered in the report that there were nine in 2014-15, and it's replaced 11 in 2013-14. Are you happy with our situation, first of all? There's only 2 difference. And the other thing is, are those Stage 1 complaints, have they been rectified? Or is there a response forthcoming for them?
It's always good news when complaints go down, even if it's only by 2. The fact is it's gone down. I think the point to bear in mind is you're talking 9 or 11 Stage 1 complaints, about 7 million collections a year. So I think you have to put that into a bit of perspective. In terms of are they resolved, every single complaint is investigated and it's either upheld or partially upheld or not upheld. Sometimes we'll get a complaint put forward to us formally as a Stage 1, which actually isn't about the service per se, but it could be about a policy of the council. They don't agree with it, so they put in a complaint against it. I don't have the detail of those complaints with me at the moment, so I'm not able to say to you, these were the 9 complaints, these are the ones that were upheld or partly upheld. field. But we do analyse all of the complaints because we want to get lessons learned from those complaints to improve the service going forward. So it could have been worse. It could have been gone from 9 to 11, in which case our complaints will have gone up. The fact that complaints have gone down is always a step in the right direction.
Thank you for that, Anna, and I tend to agree with part of what you were saying. It would be interesting for this committee to see some evidence of those complaints, and like you say, some of them are a bit grey areas. But I would have expected with the ongoing education with the staff and your personnel that these figures would have been lower than the 2 that's currently here on the report, because there's been a lot of education with the personnel in that regard, and I was expecting that to be lower.
Sorry, can I respond, Chair? I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Evans. I think, though, that, and I've said this repeatedly to members, whether it be at member seminar, council, this is never going to be a service where we have 0 complaints, waste. Just because of the nature of what it is. It's a service that affects everybody. It's a service that people get quite worked up over. It's a service that is very manual in terms of its delivery, and lots of things can go wrong. Vehicles can break down, which will lead to poor service, which can result in complaints. And the people that undertake it are human beings, and they make mistakes the same as everybody else. You know, they will have bad days. So although I will always strive to improve the service as best we can, I don't think we're ever going to be in a position where I can come here and say we've had 0 complaints about the waste service, just because of the nature of what that service is. But I take on board what you say, and obviously we'll always strive to bring those complaints down. What I think we also need to bear in mind is that the number of compliments of the service went up. So you've got a situation where the complaints are dropping, perhaps not as quickly or as much as we would like, but we're also having compliments that are going up. And that is a bigger turnaround for me, because people are more likely to complain and much, much less likely to actually ring up and say something good about the service. And that's just part of, it's our nature, really.
Sorry, you just briefly. I hear what you're saying, and it is a big service area, and you can't expect complaints, and there's the human element as well. But I wonder if it would be useful, and you touched on it, sometimes the vehicles break down. I wonder if would it be useful to let ward members know that the vehicles broke down, there's not going to be a collection today, but tomorrow. That would be really useful.
We do currently put something on social media. We put it out on the day. So once we know there's a problem, we'll put something out on social media that will say, these following streets have been missed today. Please, to let residents know. Certainly what we can do is make sure that when that goes out, it gets copied into the relevant ward members. Yeah.
Again, we're talking social media again, and we're coming back to the same issue. Not everyone's on social media.
But even when we've given it to the newspapers, they're not interested in putting it out. So even though we might ring the papers and say, we've had this incident today, there's no, they're not always interested in publishing that, if you see what I mean. So social media, and I take on board fully what you say, not everyone's into social media, but it is a very quick and easy means by which of getting information out. And when we do put it out on social media, we do always put a tagline on that says, could you please let your friends and neighbours know? Because obviously we appreciate that not everyone is on social media, but they might live next door to someone who is.
But like you said, there is a lot of people who's not on social media. So, Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. A few comments and then a question, please, if I may. I echo that sentiment raised by my councillor on my right here. If members were copied in, if there's for any reason there's not going to be a collection or there's only a partial collection in our ward, that would be great, because the residents are more likely to pick the phone up to us and say, there've been it's a miscollection. And if we're made aware that there's a reason for it, if there was a vehicle breakdown or whatever, then we would know straight away, and we could advise the residents, oh, don't worry, it'll become returned tomorrow. I welcome the fact that the department has adopted a lot of the recommendations that we made from previous meetings and put in place the KPI. So before I start being critical, I just want to say that, it's definitely a step in the right direction, that we have got these more of a monitoring capability now to gauge our performance. And I feel that's an improvement on where we were certainly 18 months ago. So I would just want to get that out of the way. I'm a bit confused, Dana, in terms of the answer to the previous question, in terms of saying that the number of complaints is reducing. Now, I can see from the report on page 32 towards the about nearly halfway up the page, it says, ensure under the heading, ensure our crews are polite and courteous during their collections. It's got there that, admittedly, that the formal stage 1 complaints have reduced from 11 to 9 in the last year. But then, I beg your pardon, I misread it. I withdraw that. I thought it said 15 complaints had been received about the cruise performance. I beg your pardon. There's actually, it reads compliments. So I take that back. So yes, I accept the fact that there has been an improvement in the number of complaints we've received. With regards to some of the clean-up, though, that the crews are doing, I know that this is forming part of the contract now, that the crews are supposed to pick up any refuse or garden waste after they've emptied the containers. I've had a few instances recently where the residents have had to perform a clean-up after the crews have been around and emptied the bins. Most notably with the garden waste, I have to say, rather than the black bin waste. Now, I thought the what we're terming secret mystery shopper is supposed to have put an end to that, and also that the crews themselves were supposed to have been made aware of the fact that if there is any spillage, they should attend to it themselves and not just leave it on the street. Can you provide any commentary around that, please?
You're absolutely right, and it's part of the service standards. If during collection the crews themselves drop something, so they're not there to pick up things that were there before they arrived, but if during the collection, so say when they're doing a recycling collection, they'll drop a can or a Tetra Pak or something like that, it is expected of them that they're to pick that up. And that is reiterated to them repeatedly, and the same with garden waste. So if they do an empty of the garden waste and some of that falls on the floor, grass cuttings or hedge clippings or wherever it is, they are supposed to pick that up. And that is reiterated to them. So if you're getting comments from members of the public, from your constituents, to say that that's not happening in certain areas, what I really need is for that to be fed through so that we can investigate it, because we do investigate it. We look at every single comment that we get. We look at everyone individually to say, right, where was the crew, what time? We can send someone to go and have a look, and then we will also speak to that crew that day when they get in. In terms of the mystery shopper, I'm still continuing with the mystery shopper. I go out, if not every week, every other week. The areas that will be picked will depend on comments that I might get, whether it's from members or members of the public or things that perhaps are on Facebook. And the idea of the mystery shopper is still there. The ethos is still there. It's to look at the area before the crews have arrived. It's to witness the crews. And what we're doing is we're picking up the crews at the time now. So if we see them and they do something we think, well, no, that's not how you're supposed to be performing, then we'll go and speak to them right there and then. And we also keep a record of it. So at the end of the day, if we're finding that we're speaking to the same crews time and time again, because I have to allow for human error, I have to allow for people having off days, because they are human beings. But if we're finding that we're speaking to the same crews time and time again about the same thing, well, then that becomes a performance issue for me, and we are addressing that through the council's, and I have addressed it, through the council's formal performance procedures. So that is still being taken forward. It is addressing it. I think that crew performance has improved. The anecdotal response or feedback I've had from members, not all members, but certainly the majority of members I've spoken to, is that they have noticed a difference and that the residents have noticed a difference. Yes, there might be pockets of areas where people remain dissatisfied, but I think, and I put it in the report, the fact that we received 24 fewer calls about crew performance and behaviour last year over the year before shows that the work we've done has had a positive impact in that the crews understand, yes, they've got to push containers back, they've got to make sure that they pick up. But it's like, the Forth Road Bridge. It's something that we have to continually do to instil that message with the crews and to improve performance or address it if it doesn't improve.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Sorry, incident last week, was you weren't there, where people were strewn all down Carmarthen Road, biggest part of Carmarthen Road. I put requests in 3 times, and in fact, I had to go directly through to one of your officers to get it done. That's not acceptable. The other issue is that you say that you've only had X amount of requests in. That doesn't take into account the requests that comes into ward members and into the neighbourhood services team. You know, so that information you've got is not correct because it doesn't collect all the information together.
It does, because what I did was an analysis of everything that came through Call to Avine over 2 years. I also did analysis of everything that came through members' inquiries. So I did both. I actually looked at both sets of information. Now, if there are things that you're getting telephone calls about that aren't fed through to members' inquiries for whatever reason, well, then I won't know about that. So I apologise if I'm not able to comment on those things. But certainly I've taken on board both Call to Avine and also members' inquiries. And what I would say is there will be an element of duplication in this, because if someone phones through to the council and reports something and is given an answer that they may not like, then they may well go to their ward member. So there might be a bit of duplication there, rather than going to the ward member instead of going to Call to Avine. I know both happens. I know that they go to you rather than go through Call to Avine, but there is sometimes a little bit of duplication. I can't comment on the specifics about what happened last week. Paper strewn down a road, I don't know whether that was through, it may not have been our crews, it could have been somebody completely different.
It was recycling, your recycling team.
Right, okay. I don't
can
know.
you investigate it, come back and let us know?
Yeah, I can.
Thank
Do
you.
Okay, can we remember as well that we're not looking at specifics? Okay, we can't. I know. Right, Councillor Ashley.
I'm not going to go on about the specific other than the fact the actions I take in my ward, and you covered that quite nicely. I mean, Alan's right in the sense that things in wards, obviously, members' inquiries to Call to Avine, and the sort of thing that you do as a member, obviously, people moan at you when you're out on the street and sort of thing. I don't know how you record those, but they take a lot of members' times up. And in pre-discussion, we did go into that in a little bit of depth. The other thing is, I spent a lot of time explaining to the member of the public, in fact, was quite a linchpin in the community, in terms of the things like Secret Shopper, because you availed me of that, and it was extremely good. And I'll compliment you on that, because I saw the process and the time and care that you in management and the teams took with it. And this contract, when you go out on that, I'm sure the members have been on that, actually avails itself. So I can see the process, which is the important thing about going out on that. But that then leads us back to the reality of that situation. There's certain area. Do you recall certain areas? I mean, the classic one's Northville. I have to be specific, but it does seem to have problems. Also, you have a problem. We well know when you get temporary crews in, or you have to rely on that, or and then holiday periods. Is the other one? Would you like to respond to that at all?
Yes, the contract is obviously a contract between the council and also the public in terms of what they expect. I'm glad that you enjoyed the experience, and I always encourage members to come out on the mystery shopping. I've absolutely nothing to hide. You can see exactly how that process runs, how we deal with the staff, the crews, as and when we come across things. I think that if you're getting comments and complaints from members of the public, if they come up to you in the street, in the club, in the supermarket, I think that there is a role for members. When someone comes up and says the guys are always throwing boxes or the guys are always doing this, I think there's a role for members to question those comments, because what I've started to learn through members is that very often people will start to say something and it's based on an old perception, or it's based on something they experienced some time ago. Not always. Sometimes it's something that's happening now, but it's about sifting out the stuff that's just old perceptions. And I think there's a role for members to say to someone when they start down that route of, well, when was the last time you saw this happen? When was the last time this happened to you? Now, if that person then says, and I've had this reported to me by members, sometimes people will say, oh, well, it was 18 months ago. So there's no recognition there that things have actually improved, or there's a role for members there to say, well, has it been recently or lately? If, however, that person says, well, it happened last week, well, then I need to know about that. And what I've always said to members, and I've been saying now for 18 months to 2 years, date, time and place. Get them to give you exactly when it happened. not exactly as in 9:36 in the morning, but certainly it was in the morning on this date and it was in down the street, because I can use the tools available to us to go into that management information to see who was that crew, who was that individual crew, and then we can call that crew in and have a conversation with them to say, we've had this reported to us. Did I cover everything? Sorry, there's quite a lot. Okay.
Thank you, Jan. I know I've been on Mystery Shopper, and it's really good. Councillor Evans.
Again, just briefly, I wonder, you mentioned about the mystery shopper, which I totally agree is a good idea. I wonder whether we could, you said you recorded that information, whether we could have a flavour of that information as well, Dana, along with the stage 1 complaints.
Yeah, I'm happy to share it. It's a simple spreadsheet that contains what happened on the day. Sometimes I'll take photographs. If I see something that I think is particularly poor, or particularly good, actually, then I will take a photograph and put that on there. And I will then put the action that I expect from the management team, which will be remind the crews, or it'll be congratulate the crews. I mean, I've actually been to streets where I've turned up in the street and I've thought the crews haven't been yet. And then actually, when I look a bit more closely, they have been, and they've put it back tidily, which is exactly what we want them to do. And I think that when they do their job well, they ought to be congratulated, as well as the times when we have to speak to them about things when perhaps it could have been better.
Totally agree, and the positives and the negatives, warts and all, if you like. And I agree with what the comments have been made about call to Ovine. Very often residents will approach us because they can't get through the call to Ovine system, and I've suggested that this system isn't working before.
Thank you. I'm going to bring Alan Williams in now.
Thank you, Chair. My question actually relates to the question just raised by Councillor Evans, that's in relation to mystery shopper. I mean, I just feel there must be ways where we can have a stronger element of mystery shopper in terms of measurement. Because it appears to me from the data we have here, we measure a lot in terms of what our crews do, but we don't measure a lot in terms of what the residents do. So therefore, we're not able totally to find some of those weaknesses that are inherent in what we do. And there will be some weaknesses across them, and I think we should measure that more strongly and perhaps in a more formalised way, because photographs of incidents, all the rest, are one thing to deal with the crews, but the other thing is, you know, what is the big problem we have here? How many people are recycling food? You know, and we can work out a number of things. So I think if we strengthen the measurement and show that, it would help a lot, because, you know, this is a two-way street. I'm a little bit worried about down individual cases when we're looking at the total standards, so I'd like to stick in the total standards, because I don't often accept or ever accept that a reduced number of complaints is a better service. Sometimes it can be, we're not getting the answers that we want, so we don't bother. And my evidence in relation to that is, and I'm not saying they are or they aren't, so I'm not come either way, but within this we see that, you know, if a councillor asks a question, they get responded to in almost 100% of cases, and yet our residents are only 92. Now, given we have a reducing number of complaints this year to last, I mean, I don't see why our customers, given that we've got a 5 and 10 day space in which to do it, that we're over 99% with everyone in terms of our standard. Because I think that should reduce, because I think there's a confusion created if people are going to councils and councils come in, as you say, Dana, double counting. It should be that our residents are able to come straight through the service, access it and get the answers, and councils can get on with dealing with a host of other things, because, you know, I can see no doubt there are people in the organisation, and it's natural, it's not a complaint, who deal with the councillors one a little bit more efficient, shall we say, than with the residents one. So I'd like to know whether we can actually strengthen that particular aspect of our service. I think if we say 5 days and 10 days, we should be able to live to 99%. It won't be 100. I know we should aim for that, and give the same service to everyone. I think that may reduce the number of councillors calling in.
Yeah, I've got a bit of feedback to that. The first thing is to say that as part of the mystery shopping, we do look out for what the residents are doing. And if we come across something we think, so for example, if I'm going in a particular area and I find black wheelie bins that are top hatting, which is when the tops are up, and they're absolutely full, and there's no black boxes out, and there's no food caddy out, clearly we've come across a resident who in that particular week, for whatever reason, is not recycling. And what I will do is I will record that address and I'll pass that on to the waste awareness officers for them to go and pay a visit. Now, I don't record that on my mystery shopper sheet, if I'm honest, but I do, and it's something I can record going forward, but then I need to be very careful about how I share that information, because there's going to be addresses in there. But I certainly do look out for it, and we certainly do make sure that that waste awareness officers are involved. The crews do that themselves as well. If they're going around and they find that actually there's some issues around whether it's recycling or not recycling properly, perhaps contamination issues, the crews will report that, either using in-cab technology or directly to us, and we will arrange for a visit. Don't forget as well, of course, we do participation monitoring, which is another performance indicator that we have within Ffynnon, but not necessarily related to these service standards. And that is, we do participation monitoring throughout the borough or in certain sections of the borough each year to see how well people are using our services, and then to see how we can encourage them to do that. With regard to the complaints, I think you're absolutely right. And if we had only seen a reduction in complaints and not seen changes elsewhere, then I'd be thinking, well, is this because people are just not bothering to complain anymore, or is it actually because it's a real reduction? I think the fact that we've had a reduction in complaints, a large reduction in the number of service inquiries that we're having, and we've had an increase in compliments, I think that is indicative that it's more that our complaints have reduced rather than people aren't coming through. And as to your final point, I completely agree with you. I think that absolutely we should be providing exactly the same level of service. I think it's something that the peer review picked up to say that in some instances councils are getting preferential treatment. And actually, we should be treating members of the public should be getting, exact the same level of treatment. Part of that is just structure. Councillors have a much easier means of accessing members than members of the public. Members of the public will go through recognised processes, and although members go through recognised processes, like the members' inquiry system, the fact is it is more direct. But that is something that we're looking to address as part of the peer review, and we will always strive to be 100%. We can't always get there, but we'll always strive to be 100%, because we would much rather deal with complaints as quickly as we can.
Before I bring you back in, Alan, when you say that you've got a designated officer, wouldn't that officer be more, available or easier contact for residents?
When you say designated officer, what do you mean, sorry?
For waste, in your report you've got...
What I said was we've now got a designated admin person who sits within the waste team. And yes, what tends to happen now is that if someone rings Call to Avine, because they're the first line of defence, if you like, first point of call, and if they aren't able to resolve the query or to get a response, it will go down to the admin person who will then ensure that there's a response. And I think that's part of the reason, I've said it later in my report, I think that's part of the reason why the number of calls we've had about the waste service generally have probably reduced, because people aren't having to ring back about the same thing, because we're now able to respond much more quickly than we were previously. In addition, and I've also mentioned it in the report, we moved the operational management team, there's only 3 of them, but we moved them in with the policy team, so we're now one unit, rather, because previously they were in a different building. So now, by having them all together in one building, and it means that when things come in, we're able to deal much more quickly with the inquiries across. So if one of the waste operatives comes into the office to say, oh, by the way, I had this problem in this area today, the policy team are there. And they can hear it and go, right, leave that with me, I'll go visit them tomorrow, or I'll go see them this afternoon, or whatever it is. So I think we've gotten much slicker in our operation.
Sorry about that, Alan.
Yes, I think my overall point about mystery shopper was that we should be able to encompass something that we can measure and actually evaluate each quarter, each year, or whenever as we go along. Because there are lots of people who do mystery shoppers. If we had, say, for instance, a set of 10 questions that we want to ask, not just about the cruise service, but I'm talking about households as well. So we can say, where are we getting better, where are we getting worse in total, in case of that total service. To get away from this happened to this house, this happened to this house, or this region, is to say, overall, we're either getting better or worse as a council. Because I wanted to relate to the 2 further measures that you put on in terms of evaluating performance. And that was the percentage of households participating in recycling and the percentage of waste actually recycled in Torvine. And it went up by over 10% of more households are now recycling, and yet our performance only went up by 0.42. So I'd like to know how that correlates as well. It's probably another question on top of the mystery shopper. Sorry.
On the mystery shopper one, I think I need to be clear about what we mean by mystery shopper. So mystery shopper is not us going out and speaking to the public about the service. Okay, so mystery shopper is when I go out and I look at a street The public don't know that I'm doing that. The crews don't know that I'm doing that. I effectively look at a street, see how it is before they've been, try as best I can to witness them. Now, obviously, they've got all day to complete their round, and I don't have all day to do the mystery shopper, so I will pick 2 hours of a day and see what I can see, witness things when they're doing their job, and then also revisiting streets to see what they're like after they've been. So I'm not. So if that was your understanding of mystery shopper, right? Okay.
Oh, sorry, my understanding was what you see, not talking to residents about what you actually see there, and also the fact that a number of other people across the council that would also perform that function for you. We're out there on particular days or councils at different times to do it, providing you know that the evaluation is an honest and true one, of course, and you do that. But I just think that we can utilise more people to do more. But just seeing what they see, I think, is rather than going to speak to people. Sorry, I didn't make that clear.
And as for the correlation onto the figures, I'm not going to be able to give you I can give you a more definitive answer after committee, a more sort of technical explanation. I think the point is that you're looking at the percentage of households that are participating, and we're talking 40,000 households. That may have gone up by, say, the number of people participating in a particular type of recycling may have gone up by 10%. There won't be a direct correlation, so we shouldn't expect to see a 10% increase in what's then recycled. It will very much depend on the material that they're recycling. So say, for example, if you look at a plastics type material, and because the amount of recycled is based on tonnage, which is based on weight, plastic is very light in weight. So although we might have a lot more volume of plastic, and so that although we might have a lot more people recycling their plastic, that won't then correlate to the same percentage increase because the weight won't be as great. But if you want a more technical response to this is how it went up and that's what that means, and then this is how this went up and that's what that means, I can get that to you, but I won't be able to do that for you today as part of committee.
Thanks, Dan. Are you saying there's no correlation, is that in effect? It's a very small...
They're two very different... They're not two, well, they're two different measures, really. One is measuring... And don't forget the participation monitoring. We will pick a different part of the borough each year. So we'll do 4 parts of the borough every year, and every year we pick up a different 4. So all that figure is telling us, it's a snapshot in time of how residents in a certain area, how often they are putting out their black box, their brown caddy, their cardboard bag. Some areas, because of the demographic of that area, will be very good at recycling. Then there will be other areas that we know because of their demographic will not be very good. And we always pick 4 areas, and we try to pick every year 4 areas across the board. So areas we know are going to be good. And I'm not going to name wards because I don't want to offend anybody, but there are going to be some wards we know are going to be good at recycling because of the types of people that live there. And then there are other wards we know are probably going to be poor at recycling, again, because of the demographic of that particular ward. And every year, we always pick a cross-section of those 4, because there'd be absolutely... The whole point of us measuring this is to take pulse of how well are our residents using the services we offer. And if we only picked on those areas that we know were good recycling, because then we get a big pat on the back by members, we're not doing ourselves any favours here. We're doing ourselves a disservice. Similarly, if we only picked on the areas that we know are going to be poor, we could be doing ourselves a disservice because we're not showing a true picture. So by looking at all 4 areas, we're trying to give it across the board. But it changes every year. So, yeah, there's not a direct correlation between the two. One is a snapshot of how well people are using our services, and the other one is our statutory target, is our statutory performance against a target that we have to meet for Welsh Government.
Councillor Bevan.
Dan, I had a number of things. I mean, I wanted to raise, please. The broad scrutiny activity for us as a committee, as per the report, is to scrutinise the difference the implementation of the service standards have made and whether the performance indicators introduced as a result of implementing the service standards remains appropriate. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask, it's kind of a 3-pronged approach really, but under the first heading was in terms of the contract. I had a few comments around the contract and the expectations, and I wanted to ask whether that contract had been reviewed. Some of the points I had around there were, let's see if I can try and find it now, I don't know what page it's on, but Oh, here we are. Has this been reviewed? Because there's been changes that we've brought in terms of service provision with regards to the food caddy liner bags now. So that was one thing. The timings as well, we're requesting residents not put their bins out before 7 p.m. I've got to say from observation that tends not to be the case. I know we're not supposed to be ward specific, but obviously as members that's what we can focus on. And I would say generally speaking, a lot of the residents would put their bins out in the afternoon, late afternoon and evening, the day before the collection. I don't think there's a problem necessarily with people bringing in their empty bins by 7 p.m. the following day, but in terms of the timings the day before, and also not reporting a missed collection until after 4 p.m. I wondered if you could provide any commentaries around that. I felt that was quite late. We would get contacted as ward members before 4 p.m. by residents if they felt there'd been a missed collection. Generally, they're pretty astute as to knowing what time their bins are emptied every week. And if they haven't been emptied within, say, 2 hours of that time slot, they're likely to be on the phone to us. But we're asking them as part of the contract to wait until after 4 p.m. to report it as a missed collection. With regards for provision of nets, speaking from personal experience, we've had about 3 nets on our black box, and they survive anything from a number of weeks to a number of months, and then they seem to mysteriously disappear. If you can provide any commentary on that. We will provide you one free, but the onus there, again, is on residents to go up to Cwmbran or Pontypool to request a new net. The crews are not providing the new nets. And also, similarly with the expectation of residents to crush some of the recycling, have you looked into the possibility of sourcing can crushers or something like that for sale to the public? Because we're putting the expectation on members of the public to do that crushing. And finally, on that particular point with regards to the contract, one could say there's a somewhat cynical view that, again, we're putting the onus on residents to go to HWRC, but that's only on a weekend. They will supply the food caddy bin liners, or come out to Pontypool or Cwmbran drop-in centre. Why hasn't there been a distribution through the crews to all households? If you wanted to adopt a cynical view, you could potentially argue to say, well, is it a cost-saving measure because you expect fewer people to actually go up to request the food caddy liner bins? So that was everything with regards to the review of the contract in terms of whether the contract is still valid going forwards. And then I got a shorter question then on the consultation, which is.
Should we let Dana answer some of those points before you go on to the next question? I'm just conscious that it's quite a few to go back on.
Okay.
So.
There's only one question around consultation, so it's very short. So will you permit me to do that? Okay. Thank you, Chair. So the second one on consultation then, Dana, was 57% of the members of the public agreed that we had captured all elements of the waste service. So I wanted to know what the members of the public felt we had omitted in terms of the feedback, because 57% is quite low in terms of the numbers we had with the respondents agreeing with the principles of the service standards. But it seems to suggest, well, there's only 57% agreeing we captured all elements of the waste service. What do they feel we weren't capturing? For example, should we be including fly tipping statistics? I don't know whether that was something the public perception was that we're omitting. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll try and take this from the top. So the first question you asked was have we reviewed the service standards? I think as part of the report I've said that as an officer group we've reviewed them. We think that for the time being that they are still appropriate, but we're asking committee for your view on that. What I've also said is I think we do need to amend them to relaunch them for the 1st of April 16 to take account of the fact that we've changed service. So that will take account of the fact that we've now got the skinny bin. It will take account of the fact that we've got a dedicated nappy service, which we weren't even thinking about when we wrote these service standards. I mean, these were written in 2013. So we weren't even thinking about that then, and also the fact that we now provide liners. So I think, to answer your question, I think they're appropriate for right now because we're in the middle of a transition, but I think come the 1st of April 16, they will need to be reviewed to reflect some of those service changes, but I would welcome comment on that today. That was part of the scrutiny process. Okay, you then mentioned about placing the container out for collection before 7 a.m. What we're effectively saying there is you can put it out the night before, but don't put it out before 7 p.m. One of the reasons, there's a couple of reasons we say that really. The first one is because it's then open to abuse by other people. You know, people who walk through the streets and will kick people's bins over and then it ends up being a public mess. There's an arson issue. If people leave them out, put them out too early, there's a problem with that. So effectively what we're saying to people is, please don't put your container out until 7 o'clock the night before, or, you know, or before 7 the next day, because obviously the crews start up around about 7, 7:30, so it needs to be out ready for them to be able to collect. So I personally, I think that's a fair request to the public to say, look, night before, or before you go to work in the morning, but make sure it's out by 7 o'clock. So I think that recognises people's different working patterns as well. I'm not sure that we need to change that, but again, I'm happy to. If you feel that we need to amend that anyway, then please say so today. Not reporting the container as missed until 4 p.m. There's a couple of reasons for that, really. The first one is, you're absolutely right, people know generally, roughly, when their crews are going to come round and collect. And it could be that every week, or every other week, depending on which service it is, the guys always come round at about 11 o'clock in the morning. Just because they've not arrived by 1 doesn't necessarily mean they're going to miss that collection that day. It could be they've had an issue, but they're still going to catch up. It could be they've had to go and tip off somewhere because of a different type of material they've needed to get rid of. There could be all sorts of reasons. And what we were finding, and I had a personal account of this, we had a lady that rang up the one day to say that her bin had been missed. So it obviously came into call to Ovine, so there was officers' time to deal with that. I think the call came in, so I'll come back to that. So there was officer time in call to Ovine dealing with that. It was then passed into the waste inbox, so there was the officer time to then print that off and take it down to the waste crews, because they weren't with us at the time. There was in the waste crews time to look at that and go, oh, crikey, we've missed one, we need to go and have a look at it. And when we actually stopped and looked at it, it was 9 o'clock in the morning. So because that woman normally had her waste collected around about 7:30, because they hadn't been by 9 o'clock, she phoned. And all that officer time and therefore resource was spent investigating something that actually wasn't an issue yet, because the guys were there by 10. So the reason we say 4 o'clock is because by 4 o'clock, we will know, is this a genuine missed collection, or is it that the crews are just a bit behind? It could be because we've got an agency driver and he's a bit slower than the normal driver. But there could be a range of issues which mean that actually that collection isn't going to be missed today, it's just a bit later than you might normally expect it to be. I think that 4 p.m. is reasonable. I think any earlier, we're not really in a position to say, yes, it's definitely missed, or no, actually, we can go back and collect that one. Your next question then was around nets. Yeah, I mean, they are small, flimsy little things. And I'm glad to hear that some of them last for months. I can look at having nets with crews. We have to be careful here because A, there's an issue of storage space on the vehicle, and secondly, they have a primary job, and that is to collect waste. And if we start diluting that job by getting them to be, oh, by the way, and we'll drop nets off in this particular house, that will have an impact on our ability to collect. And perhaps our comments we get and calls we get around my collection's been missed will go up. So I need to be careful that from a logistic point of view, we've got to find the most optimum mean of delivering these things or having them collected rather than find those optimal means of doing that so we're not affecting performance delivery. With the crushing, I think there might be a misunderstanding there. The only thing we're asking people to crush is plastic, and we're talking empty plastic bottles. We're not asking them to crush cans. And the only reason we do that is because empty plastic bottles are full of air, and they get picked up by the wind, they take up a lot of space, and they get blown down the street. All we're asking people to do is literally crush it by hand. I don't think that it needs a particular piece of equipment to do that. All we're asking people to do is just to, so when you finish your milk carton, you rinse it out, just flatten it, really. So I'm not talking crushing as in a little, a block. What I'm talking about is just sort of flatten it out because it doesn't take up so much space and it's not likely to get blown around. The next thing then was liners. Obviously, the liners were never part of this contract. The agreement by Council for liners only came in October of last year as part of the discussion around the agreement to the reducing residual capacity through the skinny bin. There was quite a lengthy debate at Council about it, so it never really formed part of this contract. It can do going forward. It was never going to be affordable to have someone driving around delivering bags to people's houses. We even looked at, when we're delivering the new bins, delivering liners, and that just wasn't an affordable option. And going forward, it's not an affordable option to have someone delivering bags to people's houses if they ring up and say, I need some more food liners. I don't know of many councils that do deliver. Most councils, where they even provide this service, it is on people going in and collecting. And the only exception we would make to that rule are certain people perhaps who are on assisted collections, who have got mobility issues, and we would recognise then. But for the general members of the public, for the general residents, if they're able to call in and collect, then that would be the preferred method. And as for your final question, which is about the 57%, I can't answer that right now. I didn't bring the consultation document with me. It was 18 months ago. I can't remember exactly what was said, but I can get that dug out. We can have a look at that, and I can send you the details of that. There's nothing that I can remember off the top of my head that they felt that we'd admitted. I think it's more around statistics. I think it's more around the fact that maybe some people didn't comment on that particular question, and that's why it's 57%. But I can get that dug out, and I can get that over to you if you think that would be something you'd want to see.
Thank you, Dan. I think it would have been helpful to have had the statistics today for the committee to... Can I just ask, before I pass you on, what hours do the refuse men work?
7:30 to 3:30, and then it'll be 7:30 to 3 on a Friday. That is the hours within their contract. If and the way that we work it is that you've got a number of crews that deal with black wheelie bin waste, a number of crews that deal with recycling. We ask them to work as a team together. So if one particular crew on a particular round for that particular day is having an issue, whatever that issue is, we ask the other crew members to dip in and help. So sometimes they will do things that aren't on their round because they're helping somebody else. Sometimes, so on and so forth. If they've done all of their work, if everything is in and everybody's work is in for that day and there's no issues, well then we normally allow them to go. There's no point keeping them in the yard just because, it's a bit of give and take really. But similarly, we then expect them to work on for us on those occasions where we do actually need people to stay a little bit longer to help us catch up on stuff. And so far, that give and take approach seems to be working quite well.
Councillor Ashley. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick thing. You said, Dana, that they couldn't afford to distribute nets or the food liners, but how is the distribution of the skinny bins being handled then? Because that would have been an ideal opportunity if we're distributing a new bin to every household, could have distributed a net and the food caddy liners all at the same time and done it as one. So that's why you say, I don't understand when you say it's not cost effective.
Skinny bins are being delivered by the company that we bought the skinny bins from. They're not being delivered by Torfaen Council. And we did look into, I think the nets is a separate issue because the nets go with the boxes. So in order for people to have, we need to know how many boxes people have got, and we don't know for each individual household how many boxes people have got. As for the liners, we did look into putting the liners with the bins, but it just wasn't something that, by the time we got to that, it was after the contract had been awarded to the company, and it would have been extra cost to the council to do that. And then you've got the ongoing issue about what happens once they've used that set of liners. So I think the question was around ongoing delivery of liners. It's around how we deliver liners from beginning to end. Not every household will use the liners. Some households may choose not to use the liners, and then we've delivered something that people aren't going to use potentially. I'm hoping that people that will, at least by people coming in and collect them, we know that they are generally going to use them for the purpose that they were intended.
Right, thank you, Dan. I'm going to bring it back now to try and get back onto service standards, because I think the liners weren't put in the contract.
Right.
So we're moving, okay. So, Councillor Ashley?
After Councillor Bevan's composite there, I've got a couple of three very quick ones. I just noticed that you provided with update information. The one bit we didn't mention, which I noticed is here, got social media, but we've also got a smartphone app. But I want to know how you've done with that. I've got a couple of other bits here, which I'm not going to do a big composite on this, but one was mystery collections, because that's something we did mention that does happen, and how we respond to them if it's that dreadful after 4 o'clock on a Friday or over the weekend bit, and your arrangements. I mean, I've got some experience of how you do that, but is that satisfactory in your opinion? You know, because I've had to personally had to ring up Call Torvine, but no, I've got a smart app. I've got to use that, but it'd probably be quicker to call Torvine. What is your general arrangement of all that? So there's two bits to do.
So on the smartphone app, obviously since these standards were launched, actually we've launched the Torvine app for residents to, well, the council has, not Waste Services, but the council has launched the Torvine app. There are elements on there for the waste service, so people can report a missed bin, people can request for new containers, caddies, whatever, nets. People can ask for, they can record other items to do with the waste service if they want to. They can put things through on that. Like all of the things that go through the Torvine app, that goes through I call it the Call Torvine system. It's a new system now, but it goes through that and it gets fed down to us in the same way, exactly the same way, that phone calls or emails or things on the website would have been fed through to us. So that is all being captured.
Are you finding people will be using more and more of it?
I don't think we've noticed. I think the idea of having the Torvine app was actually for channel shift. So the idea was that it would save people having to call Torvine, they could do it on the app. So rather than having more calls coming through, the idea was to have, instead of a phone call coming through, someone can now do it at the comfort of their own home, at whatever time suits them, without having to worry about opening hours of the council, and they can just do it on their smartphone and away they go. I don't think that we've noticed a particular increase of inquiries, and as a result of the app, I think what's happened is it's just shifted how those inquiries have come into us, you know.
What about your out-of-hours response?
So out-of-hours response, it's always going to be a difficult one. It is always going to be a difficult one. You know, the office does, the council does have its hours that it's open. The crews do go home at a certain time. There are always on-call officers. There are always people, and depending on the severity of it, they may decide to respond or not. So if, for example, there was some waste spewed all across the road and it was causing issues for the highway, I highly suspect that the on-call officers would deal with that straight away using the on-call people that they've got. The on-call people that they've got to access tend to be highways officers or street scene officers. They're not waste operatives. If, however, it's just a case that someone is reporting that their bin has been missed, and again, what I would say is just because someone's reporting a bin has been missed doesn't mean that it has been missed. You know, very often people will call up and say, my bin has been missed, and maybe it's because they didn't put it out on time. We would want to investigate that first before we responded anyway. Generally, if someone's had their bin not missed, it's not the end of the world if we don't then look at that and address it until the Monday morning when we get back into the office. Unlike a situation where you might have waste or materials strewn across the highway, which does need to be dealt with fairly urgently.
Thank you, Dana. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. The first thing was you mentioned the areas that are not recycling, Dana. Is there anything we can do to improve that situation with the recycling and education, what have you? That was the first thing. And very briefly, and this is off the subject really, is the implementation of the new skinny bins. I noticed took place, and I'm not being parochial here, in my ward recently, where the contractors stacked the black bins 4 foot high. Windy conditions, round parked vehicles and young children going past pavements. Wondered if something could be done to discourage them from, because I could foresee an accident happening there.
To answer your first question, yes, I mean, we're constantly trying to improve recycling. That's partly what the participation monitoring is about. We can identify areas where people aren't recycling as much as they could, and we will do door knocks, letter drops. There's all the road shows that we've done throughout the year, and we will continue to do. And there's a lot I think the members can do to help us in that. I mean, you know, if we've got particular problem areas, and there are problem areas, I'm looking at Councillor Owen because we did an exercise in her ward. You know, we will happily engage with members to say, help us get this message out, because as the ward members, you are the community leaders, you are the community representatives, and sometimes members of the public may not want to listen to us as officers of the council because we're the council, but they may be more inclined to listen to the local ward member because they see you as being the local community leader. So there's a lot that we can do together to encourage people to recycle, and sometimes it's just a bit of graft. It means knocking on doors, and it means trying to get the message out there and repeating until people respond.
Subject, sorry, Chair. On that subject, and you said that you didn't want to embarrass anybody by the areas to not recycling. I tend to disagree with that respectively, because we need to know those areas really from the point of view that you've just mentioned, that we could encourage people.
I can give some consideration to how we share participation monitoring. What I didn't want to do in this committee today is to sit here and say, well, this ward is very good and this ward is very bad. I don't think that's very helpful. But I'm happy to share with members the participation monitoring information that we've got, so that you can see in those particular areas how well people are responding. I'm happy to do that. Make a note before I answer the second question. Hang on. And I appreciate it's off topic, but I'm happy to answer it. Monday, we started rolling out the skinny bin. It was day one. We had some teething problems. The contractor that we've contracted that we're using to deliver the bins and collect the old bins, because you'll recall from discussions we're collecting them in and they're recycling those, had a vehicle breakdown twice on the same day, so they got behind. They tried their hardest to catch up. In fact, they worked until midnight collecting the old bins, and they worked until 10 o'clock delivering the new bins. We picked up the issue of the stack boxes ourselves. We fed that back to them on Monday, and they've stopped doing it. They're still stacking, but they're not stacking as much as they were before. And the other thing we're asking them to do is to lay them down, because they're much less of a hazard. So we picked that up. It was day one. There's bound to be teething problems on day one, some of which we just couldn't have foreseen, but we've dealt with that particular issue.
Right, okay. We're going to now go definitely back onto topic, okay? I mean, obviously the skinny bins, nets, bags, liners, they're all going to be for a future contract. So, Alan Williams, do you want to come back in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it just relates to a measure of our standards. And I'd like to know why we don't actually show within these standards our miscollections. We have miscollections for reasons in terms of overfill or side waste, and I'm leaving out as well the household that doesn't actually put its bin out. I'm talking about ones that we miss ourselves as a borough, because I think we should know what that is. I don't know whether it's a big number or a small number. My view is probably it's a small number, but if you have a look where we show our 7 million collections, only N number because of this, I think we would see the same thing. I think that would get rid of a lot of poor perceptions if we actually measured that as a separate entity within there. And secondly, but it's on the same point, within the measures, and some are within the crew measures and some are within the residence measures, we have a lot of superfluous words in some of them, and maybe superfluous measures as well. I mean, you're going to leave some of the words in there, but for instance, I don't know why we measure within ours the number of households receiving the assisted collection service, because 479 means nothing. It should be 570 or 370, whatever. It obviously means something to use the service, but I think those can not be measured for the sake of saving you some time in terms of measuring the standards for this committee. But also, some of the words, for instance, we've got where it's being courteous to crews doing their rounds, showing patience when driving behind them, comply with the highway code. Well, they have to comply with the highway code if they were driving. And I just wonder whether we can change something, because it's a dangerous thing. The crew is out on the street, they're very exposed, and I've seen some horrendous instances, and I think we should just be stronger with fewer words about keeping our crews safe, and taking some things out as well, because I think, for instance, asking our residents to stay up to date with the information we provide on www. I think, they won't do it. I think the onus is on us to communicate with them and do it, rather than say, look, if you don't keep up to date, it's down to you, mate. It's kind of saying that. Now, I know what you're trying to do, and maybe that should be something that's in the council standard saying we will communicate these on. I think it probably is in there anyway, but can we just look at that and look at some of the superfluous things that are there to make it easier and strengthen the points? Sorry, that's very long-winded.
Yeah, so your first point, it is in there. If I've understood your question correctly, and if I haven't, then please come back to me. Under the heading, provide a weekly recycling and fortnightly refuse collection on an allocated day between 7 a.m. and 4 p.m, we say the council provides over 7 million collections a year, and then one of our measures in Ffynnon was actually measuring the number of collections that are missed. And what we're saying is, of those, 0.04%, that's less than 0.5%, are genuine missed collections. So we filter out the ones where they're not actually missed because the resident didn't put out their bin on time. These are the ones where they're genuinely missed, and that is the figure that we continue to monitor. Did I understand your correction?
Yeah, I answer as being clear. I see the ones that are shown in here. We didn't collect waste on 2,885 occasions is due to contamination and or side waste.
Yeah. So they're
now,
not
where
missed.
does it say that it isn't in relation to that?
Right, sorry.
Where is that other measure?
That particular measure, what we're saying there is we're asking residents to, we will only, so that the measure is, or the standard is, we will only collect items that are in the right containers. So if something is not in the right bin bag box, we will leave a note saying why it wasn't taken. We don't collect extra bags of refuse and side waste. So what I'm saying is that this was a new measure for us, and again, if these need to be tweaked, that's the whole point of the scrutiny process is to help inform us of that. So we introduced a brand new measure to try and record, because up until then, although we knew it was happening, we weren't actually recording the numbers of it. So we introduced a new measure to record the number of occasions when we didn't make a collection to someone's house because of issues of either contamination within their bin or box or bag, or because they left out side waste. So that is us saying we purposely didn't collect from that house because they didn't conform to, or they didn't apply, they didn't put out their waste in the way that we've asked them to do that. The other figure I gave you are the genuine missed collections, the ones where we've missed it genuinely, and that was the one that's 0.04, which is less than half of 1%. Does that answer the question?
If that number is sat within what we're communicating to residents, that is actually the ones that we missed, nothing to do with you, then you have.
Yes, that is, and that is on Ffynnon, and that is in this funky document that I showed you. It's actually right there in the top in the green. It's the very first one there that says these are the numbers of collections that we missed. Yeah. So what it actually says in here is the council provides over 7 million collections a year. Of these, 0.04, less than 0.5%, are missed. So what we're saying is those are the ones that we miss, that we genuinely miss.
You put the reasons down why they've been missed on that?
No.
Right, okay.
Because, we won't necessarily always know the reason, because these aren't the ones that are missed. It could be because of an issue. It could just be human error. It could be that someone has phoned up and said, my bin is missed. We look at it, we go on the tracker system, we speak to the crew, and we think, yeah, we did miss that bin, actually. Being in mind, this is all collections, not just black or green or blue or whatever.
But there would be instances, Dana, when you would know reasons for miscollection, such as a vehicle.
Can you use your mic, please? Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry,
they would be.
So those things could be reported in a pie chart.
We've
you
not
would know
currently
if
recorded them, though, so we'd have to instigate a new system to then say, right, okay, this was missed for this reason, genuine. Now, if that's something committee feels would be useful for us to do, you can certainly feed that back as part of this process, and we can have a look into that. But again, what I've got to be mindful of, it's a very small team of people, and we have to ensure that the data that we're collecting is going to be useful data, rather than have people spend their time collecting data for data's sake. It needs to be something that, if we've got the information, what are we going to use that for, and how are we going to use that going forward? So there was a second part to your question around assisted. You made a comment about the assisted. You don't think that having that in there is needed. Bearing in mind this was the first set of service standards we've ever put together, it was always going to be a little bit, because it's our first time of doing it, there's always going to be lessons to be learned and things that perhaps we think in hindsight, actually that's not as useful as we thought it might have been. There isn't really a target around assisted collections. It just depends on who in the community feels they need an assisted collection. It's a useful, or you may not find it, but it could be, it's useful for us, as you say. It's a useful indicator of how many people are receiving that service. And again, you know, if you've got comments around, and I actually endorse your comment. I'm really pleased about your comment around the being courteous to crews, and because we've had some horrendous incidents. I mean, I've got one on camera actually of a van mounting a curb and driving over a grassy area where children could have been playing just to get around a refuse crew because they couldn't be bothered to wait. And I've actually got that on camera because some of our vehicles have got cameras fitted to them now. So I welcome your comments. But again, as part of this process, today's committee, anything that you think that we need to strengthen, add, take out. All I would say is, of course, we're now in September 15. So these standards have been running since April 15. Is it appropriate to change them in year, or do we take these comments on board ready for when we change them in, ready for April 16?
A very quick comment on that, because that was my last comment. The assisted one, I disagree with you on that, and I'll tell you why I disagree with you on that, because we've got a lot of people in this borough who don't know about this even, who could avail of it. And the fact that we know that is we could actually publicise it a bit more, because we've got disabled people, we've got elder people, we could put it out. I don't know if we go out to age, what they call them, age, make a different name now, and we could possibly post it out on to the older person's council tax demands, that sort of thing. Newport used to do that. It's a really good way of getting out to people. It doesn't require much on our part. And it says if you need assist with that, please contact us, because it's a service we provide. It's a social audit of what our services are, and I think in an audit, it's brownie points there, isn't it? To be quite honest. The other things that I've got on here is very quickly. Replacement containers. You know, you charge a suite for new houses. I think that's good, but at the end of the day, I've been telling people, I think I've got this correct. Other than the bins, you give them free if you need to, and we need to publicise that better because people aren't aware of that, which brings you on to, as far as the replacement of containers, if they're ones that you can pick up yourself, really ought to be encouraging people to go and get them from various collection points rather than us deliver them. I think a lot of people are quite capable of doing it, other than older people, then that applies. So maybe it is period of time waiting for that, or collect yourself from a suitable place. It's not explicit there. The other one, I love the bit about right containers, because you go round and you've seen it the same as I have. Newport, Cardiff, various containers. Are they okay or not? I don't know. I mean, they are they're waste collection bins. I see quite a few Newport ones around the place. Newport Borough ones. You're not acceptable, are they?
I'm not understanding the question, sorry, Councillor.
Waste.
In our borough, you're saying?
Yeah, in our borough, I quite often see Newport Borough paper collection boxes. If you go around...
What, you mean instead of it like one of our boxes?
Yeah,
you've
it's
got
like
a
one of our
Newport black
boxes,
box.
but I've seen quite a few of those. I don't know where they come from, but they're there. I just wondered whether that's an approach. If it's the same size box and somebody's gone out and replaced it, that's different from having, a bag or something like that. They at least put it in a box. You guys seem to pick it up. I think the moot point is if it's a light plastic container, then I applaud people for doing it. They've done it themselves. If it's a bag or something, then I've got no problem with that. I wouldn't have thought. If it's a like type of container, like the Newport car, I don't know where they got them from, mind you, but that's the point I'm trying to make. But obviously, because that does worry people.
Okay, again, I'll take those from the top. With the assisted, I mean, we do advertise it, and we know that social care certainly will... Social care will refer people to us. Yeah. This is a very sensitive one because there are a number of people out in our community who, whether they've got mobility issues or are of a certain age, some people don't want to have an assisted collection. They want to maintain their independence. And, we've got to be very careful about how, but we do advertise it. There are agencies out there that do know that we provide this service, and they will refer people to us. I think the system we've got now works well for us. When you say, we could put something out in the council tax and then there's nothing really to us, I'd have to argue on that one, to be honest, because don't forget that once we've had the initial request for an assisted collection, there is quite a lot of work that we have to do to ensure that the family that are requesting it actually does need it. Now, we went through quite a large audit of our assisted collections and reduced them by 2/3. Because what we found was people had moved, or people had unfortunately passed away, and other people had moved into that property, and they were getting an assisted collection, and they didn't really need that assisted collection because they had they were able-bodied themselves, or they had perfectly able-bodied people living at home with them that could have put the bin out. Don't forget, this is a cost to the council each time we do this. It's an extra resource cost. So, while I agree with you that we do need to put it out there so people do know about it, we have to be very careful that there is a work tail that comes with it, because it means a personal visit by a waste awareness officer. The other thing I would say is, yes, all containers apart from the black wheelie bin are free of charge, whether it's replacement or additional. We're constantly putting it out there. We're constantly drip feeding that out there all the time, and we will continue to do so. As for collection points, we do that already anyway. Yes. So there are stacks of boxes and so forth at places like Civic Centre, Cumbrian Customer Care Centre. Things like bins, that doesn't work because they're too big. For boxes it does, but for wheelie bins, green wheelie bins, black wheelie bins, that's not going to work for people because they're just too big and cumbersome. And we have to think about health and safety as well in terms of people, manhandling those in and out of cars or whatever else it's going to be. And as to your final comment about boxes, most of the boxes, well, I would say all of the boxes used by councils in Wales for recycling are of a standard, and they are of a standard because of health and safety, because they have to be a certain size to fit in a certain amount of material that isn't then too heavy for either members of the public or indeed the crews who are then sorting the material once they get to the stillage vehicle. So if Newport have got the same boxes as us, and we've had some enterprising residents who somehow have managed to get hold of Newport boxes, I don't think our crews are going to have an issue with that. What they will have an issue with, moving on to the second point of your question, please do not use carrier bags, because that causes our crews a big issue. Firstly, because they can't see what's in them, and we've had sharps and needles and all sorts put in there. And secondly, because it slows them down. They've got to rip open the bags to then try and deal with it. And again, we do have occasions where individual members of the public put out their own box. If the box is smaller than the standard, then the crews are likely to use it. But if it's bigger, we get back to that health and safety issue. I've got to think about, the crews lifting that weight. So I would discourage it. If it's available for free, then I would rather the public phone up and say, I need an extra box, please, and allow us to get those boxes to them so that they can then use the proper box.
Thank you for that point. I mean, I keep having to reiterate to people that because with the skinny bins, and it's something I think suspect a lot of members do, they've got free, but everything else is free other than the bin.
Okay, thank you. Right. I'm conscious now of the time as well that we haven't even discussed the action plan yet. So, Alan Williams, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. If I could just get back to the point by reiterating that my last point was about having measurements in there that are actually relevant to the activity that we are undertaking and not necessarily everything else. And in relation to that, I just want to ask Dan a question, really. We were actually invited to scrutinise the difference implementation of the service standards have made, and also whether performance indicators introduced as a result of implementing those standards remain appropriate. Given that you say on page 35, which is a summation of 7.5, you said it's harder to establish if service standards themselves have directly impacted upon the performance of the waste section. Given that you're intrinsically involved with all that, do you think we're really in a position to add a great deal in terms of those two scrutiny points?
Well, the scrutiny points, I'm asking... Oh, right, okay. So the question then is, what difference the implementation of the service standards have made? And I think I've tried to address that in the report when I've said that, if you were to say to me, categorically, do you think service standards have improved performance? I would find it difficult to say to you, categorically as an answer, yes. there has been an improvement in performance. I think there is evidence, there is empirical evidence that there's been an improvement in performance. I also have anecdotal evidence that there's been an improvement in performance. But I wouldn't be able to say, honestly, that that is purely down to service standards. I think that there's a number of things we've done in the last year to 18 months which has helped improve performance within the waste service. But I think the role that service standards has to play, it has two roles to play. The first one is it sets out expectations of the customer. So it sets out expectations of the resident. And perhaps in the past there were residents who weren't clear about what was expected of them. It also gives us a platform from which we can actually say, well, what is it we do want to measure about this particular service? And how do we then want to relay that information to the public? So I think the answer to the question is, what difference has it made? I think there's definitely been improvement in performance, but I can't hand on heart say to you it's entirely down to waste standards. I think waste standards has played a part in that, but I don't think it's the be-all and the end-all. And whether the performance indicators introduced as a result of implementing the service standards remains appropriate. I think I've also said in the report that for the time being, I think that they are appropriate, but I'm happy to receive comment from committee on that. If you feel that certain of those measures are not of use to you and may not be of use to the public, then I'm happy to consider that. But I think when we come to revise these, ready for the next launch, bearing in mind we've got a new service because of the skinny bin, the nappies and the liners, I think then is the time at which we look at it and go, okay, what is it we really want to measure? And again, I'll go back to something I said earlier. We're the first section, we're the first department in the council to have done this, and we're still the only department in the council that has a set of service standards. So we're kind of trailblazing a little bit. We didn't have a lot, there was a lot out there for us to be able to look at, to benchmark with and say, well, what can we include? I think there was one council's information that we were sent, Salford, I think it was. But there's not a lot else out there. So we're kind of, we're learning as we go. And if there are certain things that we haven't quite got right this time, then great. Let's make sure that we capture that so we can ensure that the next time that we launch these properly, it's more relevant. It's more relevant to us, and we're not spending our time recording things for recording's sake. It's relevant for members because you're able to look at it and say, I actually think there's been an improvement or a decrease or whatever. And it becomes relevant to the public as well. The public will look at it and go, well, I'm interested in that. I'm interested to know how many collections the council's missed. I'm less interested to know how many bins you've delivered. I don't know.
Thank you, Chair. Dana, that leads me very nicely on to what I wanted to raise and to ask, really. It is right. You're the first department within Torvine to put in a set of service standards and start doing having all these KPIs and monitoring. For some, well, first point is, for some of the points you've put in the report, there's been an inclusion of year-on-year data. So you've got, during 2014, we did this, and, during 12-13, we did this. But that's not consistent across all the points in the report. Some of the points in the report only refer to data for the last 12-month period. Now, whether that's because you didn't have the data for the previous period or not, I don't know. But it would be useful for us, when we're reviewing a report, to see, as a comparator, how you have done that. And fair play, you have included that on some sections, but not others. I'm looking at page 33, for example, and specifically coming on to the next point where it says collect bulky items and trade waste. We undertook 1,605 bulky collections in 2014/15. There's no numbers there for the previous year. Now, when we met as a committee before, we had a lot of debate and concern potentially around increases in fees for bulk fee collections. It would have been useful for us, as part of this report, to have further detailed information on the effect that had in terms of collections. So as a result of the bulk fee collection fee increasing, did we see a significant reduction in the number of bulk collections that we as a council provided in the following year? And that, sadly, is not in the report. There was also a concern that was mentioned by, I think, both yourself and Christina, that the expectation around that was with the fees going up, it would lead, because this is the information you'd had fed back from other neighbouring authorities, it would lead to an increase in fly tipping. But that would, increase would deteriorate after an amount of time? And again, should there be an inclusion of data in this report on fly tipping instances? Because again, there could be a correlation there between incidences of fly tipping and the bulk collection items. And just where the year-on-year data is represented, I know you've produced this new colour document there, but this is all very wordy, this document. If we could have a couple of bar charts or pie charts showing us relevant proportions where appropriate, or year on year, it's far easier for us to see at a glance if there's been significant increases or decreases in the stats reported year on year, rather than trying to pick it out from the document. So thank you. So that was the question and the observations I wish to make around the KPIs.
Yeah, I think it would have been a lot easier if we'd had statistics and measurements from before the service standards. I know it hasn't really embedded, but to have figures how many times this was happening before this was put into place, I think it would have made it as a committee a lot easier to measure.
Yeah, I take that on board. You're absolutely right. Part of the reason why I wasn't able to give previous year's figures is because we didn't have the information. It's you know, one of the things that's come out of service standards is it's made us focus on collecting information that previously we hadn't been collecting on a regular basis. So that's why in certain elements I've given the information from the year before, because I was able to obtain that. Where I haven't given it, it's because I wasn't able to obtain it. I wasn't able to give that comparison. But the good thing is that going forward, because we've almost set a benchmark, if you like, because we've done that, it means going forward, provided we keep these measures, it means that we're going to be able to show that going forward. Bulky collections, I mean, the service standards, you know, this committee's report today is about how do we do against our service standards. And the thing about bulky collections within the service standards was that we will deliver a service. So I'm apologies if there were bits that you felt we should have included. It wasn't part of the pro forma, the remit that I had. But if at a future committee you want to have more information around bulky collections, then I'm happy to do a report on that or to come back and talk about that. I think there's a bit of confusion around the comments that I previously made at committees, whether it's council, member seminar or this committee, about fly tipping. What I've said in the past is that where other authorities have reduced their residual capacity, they have seen a slight increase in fly tipping, which has lasted for a short period of time, and then it's returned to previous levels. That was not related to fees going up around bulky collection. Yeah? That was around reducing residual capacity. That was the comment that was made. As it happens, now that we're starting to measure the number of bulky collections, we're going to be able to track that over time and then be able to see, is there a correlation between bulky collections dropping or going up or remaining the same while fees go up? Bearing in mind that fees have gone up every year, year on year. So this isn't a new thing. The fees haven't gone up in the last financial year, isn't new. They would have gone up the year before and the year before and the year before. But we don't have that data to be able to report that, but we'll have it going forward. And then as the final comment, a bit wordy, completely agree, which is why I asked Comms to have a look at it and make it a bit, more easier on the eye to read. This is what they've come up with. I'm going to circulate it anyway for you to provide a comment on. I'll take on board your comment around bar chart. It's a bit difficult with only 2 years' data. You know, we can do it. Perhaps they can do something diagrammatically which will stand out a little bit more. I can ask them to have a look at that. I think that will become more relevant as more time goes on. As we've got more years' worth of data to see our performance, our trend, we can certainly do that. But as I keep saying, we're first at this, and so we're learning as we go, really. And happy to take any comments in that regard so we can improve it for future years.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. I take on board the points. You need year-on-year data for all of this, and you haven't necessarily been collating that across all the fields. Should you be including fly tipping numbers as part of your report, or would that be more expected under environmental health, or would it come under the neighbourhood services remit as part of the overall waste strategy? Should we have KPIs in for that included in this report going forwards?
We have KPIs on fly tipping. We have, I forget the code of them now, but there are national indicators around fly tipping, the two in particular that we have to report on, and I know that it goes to members and also to joint scrutiny quite regularly. It's around the number of fly tipping incidents that we receive and how quickly we respond, because we have a statutory duty to collect that within five working days. And so there are already two indicators. Fly tipping comes under street scene, which is not part of waste. So I think that, and we have been to this committee in the past about fly tipping, we've written reports solely on fly tipping that have effectively said, this is the instance of fly tipping, this is our performance, and we've talked about whether our performance has improved or otherwise, which it had last time I brought it to this committee. So I'm happy to bring it back if it's something that's still of interest to members, but I think it gets a lot of coverage already, both through the national indicator, through Funnan, and through previous reports that have come to committee. This report is about our service standard on waste, and I'm not sure that fly tipping would be relevant to this. But again, you know, if committee has a strong view otherwise, then I'm happy to receive that. We've already got an indicator on it, so it's no extra work for us. It's already there. It's just whether we think it's relevant to sit with waste.
Yeah, because I mean we are going really off topic at the moment.
Well, not really, because if it's considered part of the remit of waste, then it should be perhaps reported. And I know it's already reported, but was it one of the 12 points that was raised by the WAO back in 2013?
I don't recall, no. I think what the WAO raised back in 2013 was that the council should have service standards. It doesn't have service standards anywhere. It should trial them in waste, and if it has these service standards, it should say the following things. I don't think they picked up on specifics. Not from my recollection. Again, I haven't brought it with me today, but not that I can recall. And again, you know, fly tipping is part of the street scene. It's not part of the waste function, so we just need to be mindful that we're not confusing. Yeah.
Right, okay. Stuart, we're going to try and move on to the action plan. Is it...
Some questions around that, because if I'm getting it right, I'm looking at your actions here, the initiatives you've taken on 7.5, and the biggest problem you seem to get some action points, etc., is actually getting feedback from the public, because that doesn't seem to have been a very good spread, really. And the main thing you've honed on throughout this is complaints and the compliments. You've got those as well. And service inquiries. So we've got some detail. Are there any other things you could do or should do or would like to do that you think could add to it? I mean, things like surveys, specific things that we could add to this to get the story, because obviously you've got a problem here, haven't you, in terms of how you indicate it? Because, I mean, some of this is really, we're wanting to know what this service is doing. You've got a good feel of it, but you need to get sort of data set. And I think this is what we're struggling towards in some ways. Struggling is right, we're working towards. And the action plan is obviously where we're going to come from. But we need to know how you get that picture, and your feel as the manager, which is always what managers do, is how we as a scrutiny committee come back at it.
I think that we've got empirical data, which we've managed to pull out from whatever systems we have within the council. Yes, I mean, complaints is a very useful mode of information, so is service inquiries. What service inquiries tells you is what are people phoning us about. So that enables us to look at to see, well, what are the themes that are coming through and what do we do about those themes. In terms of surveying the public, I mean, we don't do that separately as a waste service unless we're doing it on a specific issue. So last year we did it on the skinny bin, for instance. But the council does it globally. You know, the council does this globally, and I think it's what matters to you, and I think that was done last year, I want to say, and potentially the year before. There is always a section around waste. There's always a section around...
That's quite detailed, is it?
From recollection, I think there was a question around... the last one particularly was to do with the budget. So the question was around, do you value the service and do you think it's a good service? So that information is there, you know. So, and we do look at that. That is something that we obviously get access to, and we can have a look at that. You know, we do individual surveys if we've got particular things in mind that we want to survey people on. We could look at doing straw polls, you know, and again, I know that, I know you're going to come back and say, well, not everyone's on social media, but social media is a very good means of garnering, taking temperature, because there are more and more people that are using it, and there are quite a lot of silver surfers out there. You know, we can use straw polls on things like social media to ask questions, but the trouble is, if you do that and you say, for example, say you had a question that says, do you think the waste service is good, yes or no? And 70% of people came back and said yes. That's all very well and good. But what about those 30% of people? It's, you know, if you're going to go out and do surveys, you have to think very carefully about what is it we're asking people, what is it we really want to know, and then what are we going to do with it when we get it back? It's all very well to have the information, but it has to be information that you can do something with and you know, find useful going forward. We encouraged people to respond to the consultation on the service standards, but you know, maybe it was of a matter that wasn't of interest. We used the same procedures for when we talked about the skinny bins, and we got plenty of response to that. So sometimes it's not that we're not doing a good job, it's just that maybe it's a subject matter that doesn't engage people.
Right, okay. Councillor Evans, and then we definitely... Is it about the action plan or...?
Mr. Chair, it's relative to it. Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. I realise we've overrun a bit. It's 7.5, Dana, and it mentions here about having a dedicated waste operations manager on a temporary basis. He has improved the service by the look of it in the report. How long is temporary?
The first was initially 6 months. It's been extended for another 6 months, which takes us through to, I think it's January of next year. It's while we're getting the skinny bin project sorted, because obviously there's a lot of work for the waste operations team. So yes, that will take us through to January. I think there's a lot of things that improve the service, Councillor Evans. I don't think we can say that this individual is doing a marvellous job, I have to say. But I don't think it would be fair to say that the service has improved, because I think there's a number of things that improve the service that have all worked together to help improve the service. What it's meant is that individual has been able to concentrate solely on waste and waste issues, particularly during this very busy time around the rollout of the skinny bin. But as I say, that comes to an end early next year.
Thank you, Dana.
Okay, thank you, Dan. On the action plan, the WAO review of service standards, it says once this has been put into place, it's going to extend service standards to other council services. Has that happened?
That's not one for me to answer, really. That's one for the corporate centre to answer, I think. I'm certainly looking at it from a street scene perspective, because I've seen the value of doing this exercise. And I'm certainly looking at it from a street scene perspective and thinking about having some service standards around street scene, particularly if we're saying this is a contract and it helps manages people's expectations. I think having something out there that says we will cut your grass once every 10 days, I think will help, and it might actually stop people ringing in potentially inquiring or complaining about things, because they have a better understanding about what we can provide as a council. What the Wales Audit Office report said was that part of service standards is not only to say what you can do, but to say what you can't do, so that you're actually being clear with the public around, we can do this, we can't do that. And maybe that will help then reduce the number of calls that we get around that particular item, because people then understand. But I think your initial question is one better placed centrally. It's not something that I can answer for the whole council. I think there will be someone in the corporate centre who can tell you what progress has been made with other departments within the council, but unfortunately that's not me.
And another one on the action plan. Throughout there, it says no update as yet. Find the pages now. Should we have had updates, or should... No further progress to
so
report?
Which proposals are these, Chair?
Page 43.
I don't have a copy of the report.
Oh, sorry. Once other areas of service are identified, ensure action plans are prepared, monitored and delivered.
Yeah.
So service standards are developed, communicated and evaluated. I mean, from November 13, no update. January 14, no update. August 2014, no further progress to report.
Yeah, I think that's related to, so if you go back a couple of pages, proposal 2 is ensure service standards to other council services. The council should review the pilot service standards in waste and extend the approach to other council services. So that goes back to your initial question. That's a function of the corporate centre to see or to help encourage other departments to, and I wouldn't be cited on that. I wouldn't know what other departments have done, and that is then broken down into 2 sets of actions. So the first one is through the council's leadership team, identify other areas of service delivery that need to develop and publish service standards, and then the second one is once other areas have been identified. So I think the two are. I think they're combined. So I think because the first set is saying that no progress has been made, consequently the second set is saying that no progress has been made. But unfortunately, I'm not able to update you on why that progress hasn't been made. That would be perhaps someone from the leadership team to be able to give you a response on. I can talk about my area, I can't talk about the whole council.
Okay, thank you. Any other members got any questions on the action plan? No?
I think it's apparent, Chair, that we need to address that point in our recommendations, don't we, to try and seek further clarification from the Council's leadership team in terms of whether any progress has been made, because according to this report we've got in front of us, it doesn't look like anything's been progressed at all, does it?
Yeah, we'll include into one of the recommendations later. Okay, anybody else got any questions for Dana? No? Okay, Dana, I'd like to thank you for coming this afternoon and helping with our questions. Sorry. Right. Right, now I'm going to hand you over to Catherine Turner.
Okay, Dana's going to stay for the time being, because obviously now we need to discuss what item we're going to take to scrutiny in our next round. Dana and I have had some form of sort of email communication this morning, but we've both been in other meetings, so we haven't actually discussed this in person. So I'm going to just give you an overview of where we are to help you decide on how you think we should best progress this. So bear with me. You've spoken to Lynn. Okay, what we normally do, as you know, is that we've got our basket of items from Visioning. We know what that basket of items are. I've got a list here. Dana, whoever the report author is on the day, will have been briefed by the Chief Officer. Sometimes he may be here and suggest which item they think would be more beneficial to go forward. Our next meeting, Cleaner, is on the 4th of November, and I know Dana has got a subject matter that she would like to take forward. Aside from that, and this is going to sound quite confusing based on what we've just been talking about, but the beginning of this year, we had a final WAO report on waste. So no waste service standards, although they may have been incorporated within it, the waste service as a whole. When we get a WAO review, we get a report, we back and forth as to when we get it finalised, and then at a point in time it goes to Audit Committee. That report is going to Audit Committee at the beginning of October. And what they will suggest is that the relevant scrutiny committee, which in this instance is Cleaner, then gets to look at the WA report and work with the service areas with the action plans. So you will have an action plan exactly like was put together for this back in October 2013. It's quite important that we look at that as quickly as we can. Now, originally we did think maybe we could bring that forward and look at it on the 4th of November meeting. Wouldn't necessarily give Dana a lot of time to put the report together. And also, Dana commented this morning, and I'm sure she'll give you more information on that shortly, that the report she would like to go, or the Chief Officer would like to go in November, is also very key. So therefore, one of the suggestions that we've thought of today is that the meeting after the November meeting would normally be January. I think it's January the 13th. What we wondered was to keep all sides happy, and because, you know, we've got a performance assessment coming up in February. It's really key that what we do is show that we are taking on board the recommendations that WO give to us, and we are working with them, working with service areas to action those, is that we try and bring that January meeting forward to first week of December, something like that. We won't have one in January, so you're not getting an additional meeting, but we're bringing that one forward so that we as a committee have got time to look at it. Dana knows from today that she's got 2 reports to write, or a report to write for that date, and then we've got time as a committee to scrutinise it in detail, put the recommendations forward, and the service area respond to those recommendations before the corporate assessment takes place in February. So it's not a rushed job in January trying to get everything done. So a key area for discussion, not in the visioning basket, because it wasn't something that was ready to be considered at that time, but like we said, that's live and can change and move around as we go along. It's really key, it's really important that as a committee it's looked at, so that's something to consider. But if I pass you over to Dana now, she can put also forward the suggestion they were originally going to come with, and you as a committee can decide whether or not you think it's worthwhile to look at both of them, but before Christmas rather than one before and one after. I hope that made sense.
What had been proposed then for the November committee was a report on a proposed new street scene model. So members, you'll recall that I've said previously that I was tasked by Christina before she left to do a review of street scene. I've undertaken the review of street scene, and I'm going to be in a position come the November meeting to come forward and basically say this is a proposed new model, and I want your views on it before it goes anywhere else. I didn't really want that to slip. Preferentially, I didn't want that to slip, because obviously if whatever comes out of the committee meeting, it's then got to feed into a decision-making process. There's going to be member seminars that follow, because this could be quite a big deal. And it depends on how quickly we can then get that implemented. And ideally, we want to get it implemented at least by the 1st of April 16, the new model. So, of course, if we delay bringing it to scrutiny, it then delays the decision-making process that follows, which then delays when I can implement it, because there will need to be staff consultation and so on and so forth. So I didn't really want to delay bringing it here, hence the suggestion that we move the January meeting forward, so that you can see both before Christmas, but it's entirely up to you.
Have members got any comments? Alan?
Sorry, Chair. I take it that the street scene issue is not related to in the WAO report. So they're entirely separate. Great, thanks.
So how do members feel about bringing the one forward? So everybody okay with it? Yeah? Okay, fine.
I think as
That's
well,
all we do.
from the corporate performance assessment, it's going to look like a scrutiny committee is being proactive in as much as you're aware that there's an issue, it's out there, and you want to deal with it as soon as possible rather than delaying it. So I think it can only look good in that aspect as well. Yeah, so we're agreed then that it's street scene review in November. I will arrange to change the January meeting to a December one, put a new date in the diary, etc. And then obviously the pro forma and everything will come to you accordingly, but you now know that that's your sort of deadline then, is that we work into a meeting the first week of December if we can get it in. Yeah.
No. Thank you very much, Dana. You happy with? I know you're going to be quite busy now writing reports, but I think it's got to be done. So thank you very much. So thank you, Dana. Yeah, we're now going to do recommendations, so please stay. Okay. Okay, Catherine.
Okay, as always, I've gone through and I've made notes, and if I feel there's anything that is been specifically asked to be a recommendation or I think could become a recommendation after discussion, I've noted them down. So I'll go through them and you can decide as you're going along what you think. The glossy coloured report that Comms has been working on, that Dana's going to send out for you to have a look at. I think it was the view of the whole committee that every citizen needs to receive this. And even if it is going out on social and digital media, as it will anyway, that it is key that it goes out with Torvine Talk so that we know that every person receives it, not just those people who have got access to digital facilities. Is that agreed, that it goes out with Torvine Talk?
Yeah, and the other thing, if it's not going to be implemented until April, wouldn't it be? Could it be beneficial to go through with council tax reminders?
Right, okay. It's not that it's not going out in April. They've already... This is the report telling the public how they've done since implementation of the service standards. So even though we may be considering reviewing those service standards in April, what they're looking at the moment is what you've received here, but in a format that will be user-friendly for the public, to talk about the last year. So if we took that as far as April next year, is a lot out of date. This is current as what has happened in the year since they've been implemented. Yeah. So it would be timely that it's done now rather than October. In April, sorry. All right then, so that's one. Right, the next one. Dana was saying that if there are problems, and she gave an example that a vehicle would break down, that they would put social media alerts out and ask the people who are on social media to pass it on to those who are not, etc. There's a request that when those social media alerts go out, that the relevant ward member be made aware, so that if you do receive a call on a day, you know then straight away that it's because a vehicle has broken down or whatever the issues are. And if people do come to you because they're not on social media, you can give them an answer pretty much straight away. Yeah? Right, now, you may have to help me with this one, Alan. This is where we were talking about the mystery shopper. Yeah. And I think I've got what you want, but there seemed to be some confusion. So what was originally said, that there should be something to show whether we're improving or not, and some way of evaluating it from the mystery shopper visits. So from what I've put together, is that they go out on their mystery visits. Sometimes they do a write-up, sometimes there's photographs, sometimes they deal with the member of the crew at the time, but it's not necessarily written up. You were saying something, and stick with me now in case I'm not on the right lines, around having something like a specific list of perhaps 10 points that they would expect to see or not to see that are ticked off as they do their visits, that they can record that information from, and at that point, in a year's time, they can say out of all of the mystery shopper visits that we did, which are however many there are, these are the questions, the points that we expected to see or not to see, and this is the outcome of that. Whereas currently, all we know is that sometimes they may talk to a crew, sometimes they may take a picture, you know, whereas it's actually pulled together.
What you're talking about is a benchmark and a pro forma.
Yeah, which I think is something that you mentioned last time we had this meeting.
Yeah, I think you got in one, Kath, so I don't think you need any help.
Hmm?
I think you've got in one, I don't think you need any help with that. Yeah.
Yeah? Oh, good idea, there's a scorecard.
And in fairness, Chair, Dana did say that she had records of all those mystery shopping events.
Yeah. Let me write that down. Hang on.
Can I just say what you need is, what's the word, consistent record across, rather than doing one thing. Yeah, it needs kind of consistent, so they can, each area gets recorded. Maybe photographs, they work as well, to be quite frank. It's
and
more
it
than...
does seem to take
but that's a good record on that.
Yeah. Okay. So then we talked about miscollections and why we don't record it. And then I think we found out that we do actually record it, but it wasn't necessarily that clear. And we're saying that we don't actually record the reasons why. And I know she said that she didn't always have the answer to that, and it is half of a 1% that are missed not due to contamination, etc., but sometimes vehicle breakdown, human error. But is there something we can do to emphasise and show that? Alan?
Well, my worry was that both the numbers in the report, 0.04, they were spookily close together. And I didn't want to talk about that at that stage, but I think we should look at it, because I think we should just report the things that we actually miss. There's not a problem with it. I mean, I think one thing we did miss was to thank Dana for the improvement. Maybe churlish was not to say that for all the questions, that there is an improvement in the service. But I think in terms of this one, I think it's things people would understand, and it isn't hiding behind anything. It's saying that's how we performed, and we'll have an ongoing measure.
And do you think there should be examples of reasons why, like vehicle breakdown or human error? I don't think they currently record that as such, but give some examples so that members of the public would know why.
Sorry, I think they've probably got some of those internally. Whether externally they'd want to see those at the end of the year, I don't know. Other people would know better than me about that. But, you know, to me, if my bin isn't collected, I don't care if it's a breakdown in a vehicle or somebody didn't turn up, I said, no, I just know my bin wasn't collected. There are obviously reasons for that not happening. The council doesn't do it on purpose. But I just like a good service, which we get. So I think it's, it's just a kind of how many times we do it, because I think it would be a small number.
She did say that she already had some of that data collated in terms of vehicle breakdown information, so she could make that provision quite easily, I think. The difficulty comes in correlating how many say you had a vehicle breakdown that impacted one area and you had half a dozen residents ring up in that impacted area, say, oh, there's been a missed bin collection. The difficulty then, which places the additional workload on the administrative person, is correlating how many calls they got from that particular area that was impacted that particular day when the lorry broke down and blah. That's what we don't want to become too burdensome for in terms of the reporting. But where she's already got information collated, oh yeah, we know that the lorry broke down 4 times last year, then they can provide that information in the report, even if that doesn't 100% correlate to all the missed bin collections.
Yeah, I think what is actually recorded does require a bit more thought, because, for instance, you'll have issues, I know particularly it would be in Blenavon in relation to weather, and you've got a great fall of snow. I don't think there's too much the council can do apart from try its best to get there. I think there'll be some individual things about that, but whether or not you include inclement weather within that measure, whether you say we had this, this is purely where we've got it wrong without any outside factors. I just think it needs thinking through about all these circumstances, which maybe they need to do.
Perhaps more often than the south of the borough. So I would like to see that included, actually.
Okay, and then we go to your, Councillor Bevan, your points regarding comparative data. Dana quite rightly explained that some of the measures were new measures specifically put together for service standards, so therefore there was no comparison data going forward. So going on year, there will be background information that we can compare one year to another. But it might be worth, from what I could gather from what was being said, that if, as we go along, any new measures get taken on board, that when we report them the following year, that is referenced that is a new measure, so therefore no comparative data available. And then you're not in the position of thinking, well, why haven't they said what it was the year before? Specify that it's new. The other thing was that you mentioned is pictorial evidence, such as pie charts or bar graphs. In this instance, yes, when there may be only 1 or 2 years data, maybe that wouldn't have really shown much of a picture. But by this time next year, when they're doing their next report to say how well they've performed, there should be 3 years of data then, which is quite meaningful. So it's whether or not you want to put a recommendation in that going forward, it might be more user-friendly to residents to see it in pictorial form rather than lots and lots of words.
Yeah. Easier to understand.
People can see it at a glance rather than trawling through the information.
Can I respond? Yes, you captured it exactly well. You captured 2 out of the 3 points I raised. I felt that there would have been, in some areas, sufficient information for them to have given us a pie chart where they had data, but they hadn't included it in the report. One example being the point that our co-operative member, Alan, raised about the miscollections, for example, where they did have information regarding perhaps lorry breakdowns and things like that. So they could have put that in a pie chart. So even on 1 year's data, they could have presented that information in a more user-friendly format. I do accept the fact bar charts and stuff is better when you've got 2-3 years worth of data and you can see trends and you can see whether things are increasing or decreasing. But the number of bulk collections, I would have thought that perhaps they would have had that information fairly readily because people have to pay for that. So she probably could have got hold of the number of bulk collections for the previous year. So we could have perhaps had a comparison specifically on bulk collections. And I'm coming back to bulk collections because it is an issue that we agreed as a committee. We agreed a decision by, I think it was by the executive or whatever, to increase the fees. And I know there was a lot of debate. Is it going to lead to more fly tipping, blah, blah, blah? Is it going to be more or less collections? And we didn't have that information in the report, whether there was a significant drop or whether the numbers stayed the same regardless or whether the numbers increased with the bulk collections year on year. And I think, from memory, I don't think Dana said, oh yeah, but the fees have been going up every year. but I got the impression that they hadn't gone up every year, and that when we as a committee approved that, that was the first fee increase that they've been for quite a number of years, 2 or 3 years. So, anyway, the other concern I had was regarding the fact she couldn't answer there hadn't been detailed analysis done on why only 57% of the respondents in the consultation felt that all the categories in the contract were fully inclusive. So what was it that the other 43% of the population felt we weren't capturing the data on? And she didn't have an answer for that. So.
Yeah, she didn't necessarily have an answer because she didn't have, obviously, all of the consultation documents with her, but this came up this morning because it was a question that Gwyn had put forward on email, and Alan picked it up, where it said 57% agreed that they've captured all elements of the waste service. The following paragraph in the report said the comment received as part of the consultation referred to perceived failings in the service, such as, so that she has listed what those things are: crew throwing boxes, items left after collection, lack of response to complaints, and items not delivered on time. The responses were almost exclusively based around what the Council is expected to do, and there was only one comment on the section of the standards of what we expect householders to do. As a result of these comments, the service standards were amended to directly address these issues. So even though she may not have had the responses in front of her, it is referenced in the report.
Where are you reading that from?
From 4.7 in the report.
Did this come out of
page 30.
Did this come out of did this come out of the council survey, or did this come out of her survey?
Her survey. The MySay survey.
That was interesting what she said about the council had, I think, because I forgot about that one. You know, the overall.
We've just done a resident survey as well, so that's quite recent.
Yeah, so there is other reference material on what residents think, which she could have put in, couldn't she?
There's a lot of statistics that could have gone in there and figures. Alan?
I'd like
Those
to give
the statistics weren't specifically on service standards, which is what we're scrutinising in mind. It's not on what they think of the waste service, it's what they think of the waste service standards, which are a different thing.
That means that what you've got there is actually relatively thin, isn't it?
I think, Chair, on a more general point than that, I mean, to use the comments of 25 residents, I think is possibly wrong, because that is totally statistically insignificant, and it's one of the quandaries you have when you go to ask people is how many reply to you. Do you then ignore the information when they've said it? It's a difficulty for them, and that's statistically insignificant in terms of that. And I wonder whether or not we should be doing something different instead of some of these surveys that are, you drive a horse and cart through responses.
Could I make a point here? Because that's why I asked that other question. I quite deliberately asked it, because we need a different methodology that doesn't involve staff in there doing it. Because what we technically need there, and I don't know how we do it, is an independent survey of some sort, asking specific questions, because they obviously don't have those set of skills, or they need that set of skills brought in, because we're not asking the right questions. The other question I was going to ask, which I didn't ask, is how do other councils around here do it? Because at the end of the day, do they buy the skills? Do they buy those questions in, get independent surveys done? Because I'm not happy about it, to be quite honest. After what Alan said, 25 people is not right. You could have a telephone questioning service, I don't know how good they are, or you could go around and knock on people. You could do something different, but it does require somebody to go out there and do it.
Especially when they've gone out and done different projects, like they did in my ward. They knocked every door, asked questions then, they could sort of combine the two and do it at the same time. Hugh?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to echo. I hadn't noticed that, but it's a very, very valid point that Alan's raised there. I hadn't noticed it until he pointed out that out of 7 odd million or 8 million collections, we only had 25 views of 25 residents. It's totally a non-representative sample of the whole. So we can't take that on, can't accept that as being representative of.
Can I make a recommendation, please?
I think in 2013 was there only 22 in 2013 people So I mean, the numbers are not...
Can I make a strong recommendation that funding be sought for some sort of independent, not independent, but some sort of survey, but that's more proactive? I don't know, but this is meaningless.
What we can do to encourage people to respond better than what they have. Well, surely they must be as disappointed as us with the responses.
But maybe if we're going to send out things to every door instead of social media, maybe that would encourage people to answer more. I don't know. The thing is, you cannot force people to get involved and to answer questions and do surveys. You can't force them. So I don't know the way forward.
I'm sorry, Chair, but some sort of way of actually going around and knocking on 1 in 100 sample would be the only way of doing this, and it does require something in this council to do. This is too important a service to ignore this. Make that as a recommendation, please.
Okay, right. So
Perhaps we could include something in Torvine Talks. I know, and if you're saying we haven't got resources available to employ an outside body to do a phone poll or go around knocking on people's doors, perhaps if we could include a survey within Torvine Talks, I think you'd get more people likely to respond to that than you would through doing something on online and through Facebook and Twitter.
Can I say perhaps this isn't one maybe totally for this committee. I think it's probably a borough-wide issue, and maybe it's something that should be considered in total. The survey works that we do and how we consult, maybe that just needs to be looked at in total rather than one just for this particular report. Because I say in all fairness, this report, they've taken some things on board, although it's not a representative sample, which are probably sensible, which are sensible when you read them, the points they've taken. So I wouldn't dismiss that totally, but I think maybe for the future, because I've seen some other ones as well, certainly one in relation to education, where the sample was so statistically insignificant as to be a waste of the borough's money in actually carrying it out. So I think maybe this is a general one and not just one for this specific instance.
Can I just come in here a minute, just very quickly, and say I've seen this go past my committee as well, which a customer focus service as well, same thing. So yeah, that point you're making is a good one, but that's why I said if we combine the budgets and do a survey on each element of it, that makes sense. But that's why I said to you that, because that education, that all combined and done as a sampling survey would make a lot of sense. Maybe that's what we need to say in that recommendation.
Right. I understand what you're all saying, but my understanding of it is that they went out in January to March 2014 prior to the service standards being implemented to get people's views. My understanding of it is that they're not intending on necessarily going out again on this particular subject. They've asked your views as to whether or not they think that they need to be changed going forward in April to take on board things with skinny bins, etc. And maybe at that point they may ask again. But is the recommendation going forward if they choose to involve members of the public again? Because they haven't specifically said they are going to. So you can't... No, but what I mean is on this particular subject. I mean, we've just had a resident survey. They've asked on this. There's MySay consultations going on all of the time. You know, you can't just constantly bombard people with things unless it's something that's specific to what's going to happen or change. So if they're not intending on going out again and asking people's views on these at this current time as a result of this report, can I just say going forward consideration to be given? Yeah?
Maybe after the... But we could always use the leading engagement officer in the comms team, couldn't we?
Because what percentage of the population is that? 25?
Okay.
Can I come in just on one very quick point, Chair? We've been asked to look at this and say, basically, is it fit for purpose? Now, I want to pick up on what you said there. It's evident to this committee, well, to me, and I believe the rest of this committee, that no, it's not. That the contract is out of date because of changes in service delivery. I think that requires an immediate change. I don't think they should wait and say, oh, we'll review it next August in 6 months' time. the contract should be revised because as part of the WAO audit recommendations, and I saw it on, I think it was under areas for improvement, it says, I can't find the exact paragraph now, but when I looked at it, it was, oh, here we are, proposal 3, put mechanisms in place to support the new waste services standards. The Council should agree, publicise, measure, report and review and evaluate these waste service standards, right? Well, we have agreed, we have publicised, we have measured, we've got the report in front of us. We're now doing the review and the evaluation, but there's got to be that evolution, the ongoing review. And I don't think that it's fit for current purpose. I think it needs a review now for the contract to reflect the changes in the service delivery that have already occurred. I mean, the fact that we're already started rolling out the skinny bins. Some people will have already had them. By the time this is revised and publicised, quite a few people in the borough, maybe the majority by then, might have had their black skinny bins. So I think it requires a review now, and not just a recommendation to say, okay, we'll make a recommendation that needs to be revised next April.
And I've got it written down here. Are changes mid-year appropriate? Do you need as a committee to consider? That's one of the things Dana said, so that's something you need to decide upon.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I've got that point down in relation to time, and I think the number of issues, I don't think it's quite straightforward that we should change now. They are reviewed, and this is part of the process. We're involved in this review that's going on now. But when they actually implement it, I think it is a moot point, because, yes, they're rolling out skinny bins now, and that will have an effect. So do we change them now, or do we leave them and just reflect it in January? There's also a report that we're now going to consider in November, December, about waste from Welsh Government, Welsh Audit Office again, I believe, which will have some implications on what we put down in terms of our standards and may need to revise them again. So can I suggest we just actually wait until our November/December meeting before saying that's where we're going to make our recommendation in terms of where we would like to go, because we'll have new information, and I think it's probably better to do that rather than make the changes now and then have maybe to go and adjust them again. If we're trying to get the right communication out to our residents, it may be a bit clearer if we did it that way.
So if we write down then that we're going to look at it and making recommendations after the next November meeting, yeah, and then that sort of covers us.
Yeah, taking on board the comments that Alan's just made in light of this further WAO review in November, December, where we're going to have a meeting, he's right. There might well be a requirement for further change. So perhaps we have to adopt a slightly different approach. Rather than proceed with what I recommended originally in terms of full-out publication of the new service contract, is perhaps we just revise it and amend it online, so then there's little or no cost to us. And then we do the big push on the publicity with Torvine talks and leaflets and stuff, perhaps next April when we've got the new one. But I do feel that the contract as it stands at the moment, which is what we've been asked to scrutinise right now as a committee, is it fit for purpose? Well, it needs revision, basically.
I still think we've got to cover the fact that that sampling with the public was thin. Just we are aware of that. That needs to be written in there. I think we've all said that.
Yeah, I've got a significantly insignificant response to the MySay consultation. Needs to be done differently, research into what we can do to encourage residents to get involved, but it's going forward, not as a result of what we've done.
I would also say that that process is okay, but the actual monitoring side of it, with the contract is the worrying bit.
And then one more, in the action plan there was the recommendation that once waste service standards are implemented that they look to consider other service areas. Yeah. As Dana said, she's considering it, but only just looking at it from a street scene point of view, but for other services across the council she's not able to respond to that, and she felt that the leadership team could provide an update on whether other services are looking at introducing service standards. do you want to request an update from the leadership team on that?
Make sure that something is being done.
So she's right to say that. I don't blame her for saying that, to be honest.
Okay, that's all of the recommendations I've got down. Is there anything anyone feels that I've missed?
No. Right, okay, so the date and time of next meeting is scheduled to take place on the 4th of November. We've now got an additional item. I'm going to ask now for the webcam to be switched off, as we have an item which is not for publication by virtue of paragraph 13 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972, as amended by the Local Government Access of Information Variation Order Wales 2007, because it contains information likely to reveal the identity of an individual who would not expect the information to be known to the public. The public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs that in disclosing the information. So, can we turn the webcam? Thank you very much.